Hi everyone, Angelo here, and it's Palm Sunday. So we know this story. Of course, we know this story. This is the story of Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem. So they're making their way near to the city, and he sends two of his disciples into this village and tells them to go and get this donkey that nobody ever sat on. And if anybody asked them what they're doing, he told them exactly what to tell them. And then there were people putting their garments on the ground and palms on the ground and presumably waving palms and screaming out praises, Hosanna, and blessed is the kingdom of our father David that is coming. And of course, this would have been in the context of the people being oppressed by the Roman Empire. So this would have been a moment of liberation, of what felt like pure freedom. And I remember growing up, I was just to wonder, like, why would Mark focus on this dialogue between Jesus and the disciples and saying specifically exactly what needed to be said, if in case anyone asked? And I mean, I used to think, like, okay, Jesus is God, so I mean, you know everything. And I mean, yeah, sure, right, perhaps. But as I got a little older, I started to think, you know what? Jesus probably had his people on the inside, and this would have been their way of supporting him. Meaning that they knew beforehand that this was going to happen. So this would have been a premeditated event. And I used to wonder too, why would the gospel specify that this donkey or colt, meaning a young donkey, why would it be specified that it was never sat on? And I know many of us hold the view that is a purity vibes. And I mean, sure, perhaps I think that perspective is valid. But it also makes me wonder if this is Jesus symbolizing his philosophy of the last shall be first, meaning that what we exclude and ignore, God takes and sanctifies it. Because this would have been a beast of burden. So they probably saw the donkey and was like, we can't use this, it's of no use to us. Whereas Jesus says, no, let me take this. And God says, I will bring all of this goodness into fulfillment. And then we have the people, they would be putting their garments down on the road and the palms on the road and probably waving, they say, here leafy branches. And it just makes me wonder if the garments that they put down on the road could also symbolize our exteriors as well, our egos. Because, especially recently, many of us have this view that the ego is bad. Whereas I don't think any professional might say that the ego is something bad. I mean, it is what it is. However, it is a part of us. And God made everything good, especially us. So the ego being a part of us is something good as well. We may not necessarily like parts of our ego or our entire ego, perhaps, but it's still good. It's still a part of us. So it makes me wonder if we could put our egos down, let Jesus triumphantly walk on it, take it, sanctify it, and then we put it back on, we pick back up our egos, and then we make our way through life. Because Lent is about transformation, right? And it's about being moved to change. And we come in there to the end of Lent. And the thing is, within our egos, a lot of our beliefs are held there too. And then, as Catholics, or not just Catholics alone, but many Christians, we hold this belief of pro-life, meaning that what pro-life means is from conception to natural death. However, the pro-life rhetoric, politically at least, often centers around unborn babies. And I mean, of course, rightly so, yeah. At the same time, pro-life extends beyond just those moments that we have in the womb. And I feel like we need to expand our view of pro-life to more than what it currently is, to be what it actually should be, meaning from conception to natural death. Because it doesn't seem like we're doing a very good job at advocating for life in its entirety and in its fullness. Because, as we know, we're all well aware, all over the world, people are dying. And especially here at home in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have this view too that if a person is an innocent and they die, then okay, they got what was coming to them. I don't believe that that is what God looks at us and thinks. Because whether innocent or not, a person is still a person. They were still given life by God. And if their life was ended unnaturally, that is not the will of God. So we need to start advocating for more than just the babies. I mean, we don't want any babies to die, of course not. But we also don't want any human being to die, or at least we shouldn't. And, we are consumed in a situation of violence here in the country. And I would have mentioned this before. This would have been the third Sunday of Advent, where Father Martin Sergio and I, we would have gone to this candlelight vigil in East Port of Spain. And it would have been centering in a place called St. Paul Street. So we make our way there, and Martin goes to the police and he introduces himself and the team and says, we're here for the vigil. And the police was like, what vigil? And Martin was like, well, we're having a candlelight vigil, and they said the police would have been informed and all that, and we'll be making our way around the block and everything. And the police was like, huh, well, that's news to me. So, we're talking a little bit more, and the police asked, so where exactly you're going? And Martin said, well, St. Paul Street. And then the police was like, no, it's five of them in the vehicle, right? With guns half my size. And I'm a fairly tall person. And the police was like, where are you going? So Martin said, St. Paul Street. And the police was like, all you're brave. Not very encouraging, right? And I mean, give the police their credit, right? If you all ever see this video, anybody who was in that team, thank you. And I do give you all your credit. Because they came and they did make the vigil with us. But those comments, that conversation, I don't think that was a sign of apathy. I do take that as evidence of frustration. Because, I mean, there's no secret. We have a lot of corrupt police. However, I do believe that there are many genuine good ones, and I do believe the good ones are the majority, who are trying to maintain some peace and order and to help people live good, long, natural lives. But of course, there are the ones who continue to perpetuate corruption and do facilitate a lot of the crime that takes place as well. But the thing is, we need a solution to this crime situation. I mean, Jesus' people needed a solution too. And Christ had a solution, and this was his solution. Because in the ancient world, in the Greco-Roman world, horses were a sign of military might, meaning that if a person, a leader, got onto a horse and made his way into a city, that was him showing his power and his dominance. Jesus didn't use a horse. They specifically mention here that he used a colt, a donkey, a symbol of non-violence. So I believe the solution that we need to our crime problem here as well, and I mean all over the world, but I'm talking specifically here in Trinidad and Tobago, we need a non-violent resistance. I mean, that's what Christianity started off as well. I think is, I don't know what it will take for our leaders to have compassion, or at least if they do have compassion, to translate that and to show that in tangible ways. Because so many of us will never see our leaders, especially our political leaders, until it's election time. It's 2024 this year. We have election next year, so I'm sure we'll start seeing them walking about soon. But just last week, we had yet another incident in Port of Spain, where the gang warfare is beyond rampant at this point. And 5 people were murdered. And people are murdered daily, especially in and around Port of Spain and the surrounding areas. And it's not right that so many people have to live in fear, not knowing whether or not a day will be their last. Because again, that is not pro-life. That is not a natural death that so many people are suffering. It's nothing less than crucifixion, honestly. So the thing is, anytime something major like that happens, okay, that doesn't happen very often. Anytime something major like that happens, what we get, especially again from our political leaders, is things like a pittance speech. We condemn this and that, and I'm not sure that I see many policies being implemented for actual results to happen. I'm not discounting the good work that anybody does, of course not. But at the same time, it's way too much, and we do need solutions at this point. Our political parties, both of them, they're just waiting for things to happen, for them to say something wrong. They're waiting just for each other to make a mess so that they could capitalize on it and use it to attack one another. They spend so much time attacking each other rather than gazing on the face of the people that they so claim to love and represent. I mean, my honest opinion, and this is an opinion, is that they do not care about us. Or at least it really doesn't feel like it, the way so many people are dying day after day, especially unnaturally. So the thing is, leaders, if you can't handle the situation, come out and say that. Step aside and let more capable people try their hand at it. Because there's no shame in trying your best and your best not being right for the situation. I mean, it's fine. It's happened all the time in life. At the end of the day, it's not your fault. You would have inherited a messed up situation that would stem all the way back to colonialism. But then here, I want to appeal to my religious leaders and all religious leaders and religious leaders in any community, really. We need to start speaking out more against the violence. I mean, we do a lot, but I do think we need more of a consistent effort, especially if, that is the solution that I'm proposing, of nonviolent resistance. If it is meant to be effective, I do think we cannot let up on speaking out against this violence. Because, so I'll take the Catholic Church alone, for example, where we have, say, more than 250,000 Catholics. And if we say, well, it's 11%, but let's say, for simplicity's sake, 10% of people attend Mass week after week. If week after week, 25,000 people were to hear this message of resistance, of nonviolence, I am very sure a lot of things would change for the better. And the thing is, we look to our government for help, no matter who's in power at the time. And all over the world, many religious communities will look to their governments for help. I mean, I think it's natural, especially if we want to have collaborative efforts to be able to make the world a better place. But again, my opinion is that it does not seem that they genuinely care about us. So maybe, 1700 years ago, when we stopped being persecuted and we became the majority religion, maybe they helped us out then. But I feel like they got what they wanted from us. And we do need to start taking ownership of who we are, especially given the context of the situation of senseless violence, and start raising our voices more. And then to those involved in gang violence, it seems like you all are just the nails that are being used to crucify the country. And in order to be leaders of this violence, y'all are Judas betraying your people. You're cutting down your sisters and brothers, especially because many of you feel like you have no choice and this is the only way to go. But that's not the case. There is an alternative option of uniting together, of not being violent, and rather resisting oppressive systems in non-violent ways. But at the end of the day, y'all might be the nails and y'all might be the betrayers, but you are not Pilate crucifying us. Pilate is those at the top who don't want to take action or to take ownership that they may not be able to take action and to allow other people to try, or to expand the efforts to have more of a collaboration and a joint effort to actually tackle the problem that we do have. Pilot is this death dealing system and the people that continue to perpetuate it. It needs to stop. Because so many people are being used as messages to send to one another. I mean, for example, that same situation last week, it seems like that was a message being sent to other people. And it's not right because we are human beings, we're not objects, we are not messages to be sent. And the thing is, this takes me back to 2006, so 18 years ago. And so I was an altar server, and it reminds me of one of the altar servers that I used to look up to. You know, a person who I used to see as an older brother, Jerome Clark. And it was roughly around this time of the year, actually. It was around the middle of March. And I remember coming home from school a day, and my mother was on the phone, and I could tell she was distraught, you know, she was upset. Something happened. And I realized she was talking to my head altar server at the time, Frankie Maraj. And I turned to my sister and I said, you know, I think something happened to Sherlin. Sherlin would have been another one of the head altar servers. Especially because it seemed like people were kind of out for Sherlin at the time because of rumors wrongfully that were being spread about him. And then my mother got off the phone and then she sits me and all my siblings down because we all knew him. And she said, look, Jerome died this morning. Now, Jerome was 20 or 21, right? So young. And we were like, what? And she's like, yeah, but not only that, you know, he was shot. So, of course, this is even more disastrous news because Jerome was involved in autism for such a long time, too. You know, I mean, he grew up in church and he was a good little youth. So, middle of the week now, we practicing for Jerome's funeral. And the majority, most of us were teenagers, right? So we're children. Children should never have to be practicing for the funeral of someone their own age. And the thing is, it came out that most likely what it seems to be is that Jerome was simply used as a message to get to someone else who he knew, meaning that the bullets that he took was actually meant for someone else just to send a message and pain throughout a community. And then fast forward to later in the week where it's Friday, the funeral was a Friday. And I remember it would have been about 10 minutes before the mass. And all the officers was in the back and we dressed and we preparing to do this. And the same person what I mentioned before, Sherlin. Sherlin and Jerome were like ring on finger. I talking about they were best friends. And we just hear Sherlin scream out and you run outside. You know, we were in the sacristy and you run outside to the side. If anybody familiar with St. Finbar's, there's some pews on the side. And he went by the statue of our Blessed Mother. And he bawled and he bawled and he bawled. The thing is, when Shona ran outside, we all ran after him, you know, and we all there surrounded him in his despair. And he just bawling his eyes out, right? Shona being around the same age too. Shona was like 20, 21. And these were the senior altar servers. So most of us were younger than that. And we just stood around him and we sat with him in his pain and in his grief. I mean, we were all sitting with one another in our pain and in our grief. And then the next day, Frankie called all of us together for an altar service meeting. So that would have been Saturday morning. And then Sherlin says to us, because we're talking about the situation, right? And Sherlin says to us, he's like, look, there's something I would like to tell everybody. And he don't make an eye contact with anybody at all. I remember specifically. He just sitting and he's staring at the ground. And he's talking in a very low voice, but loud enough that everybody could hear him. He said, but when I ran outside yesterday and when I looked up and through my tears, I saw all the auto servers surrounding me. I realized that my power and my hope comes from this group and this community that I'm a part of. And I know if I were to take violent action, I would lose all of this. So rather, I choose to leave this in the hands of God. I want to tell you that that was a powerful moment and definitely very formative in my own life in terms of the power of community and of nonviolence. I remember finishing off that funeral, and as we crossed the threshold of the church in Jerome Father, he was like, he bawled, he's like, I'm never gonna see my Jerry again. And I mean, I was 13 at the time. And that really drove things home for me even more in that moment. And how many people, how many mothers, how many fathers, how many siblings, friends, cousins saying they will never see their people again? No wonder so many young people growing up angry and then ending up in a situation that they feel like they have no other choice but to end up in. In a yearning for revenge or even for justice, thinking that this is all they can do because they do not feel like they have the support of a good community. I think the messages should not be sent through other people because, again, we are not objects, we are human beings. We're all made in the image and likeness of God. We all have that human dignity. But what I'll propose is that we send messages through the objects that we do have. Because, of course, it's Palm Sunday, so many of us will be leaving Mass with palms. So, what I would suggest, I mean, we have all these different beautiful designs that we make, right? Whether it's the palm crosses or, the kind of staff looking things. Whatever it is, sometimes we just have the palm there itself. What I would encourage us to do with these objects that we do have, instead of decorating our places with them and, blessing and sanctifying our places with them, I mean, that's all nice and well and good, yeah? What I would suggest is that we take those palms and write short messages on them. I mean, whatever the case may be, like no more crime, no more violence, no more guns. And then leave it outside our leader's office or perhaps post it on social media. I mean, I know for my own self, I'll be writing hashtag Psalm 22 on my palm because, of course, it being Palm Sunday, we read in the Gospel of Mark. Psalm 22 is what Jesus would have started out saying on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? Because this violence feels like nothing less than a God forsaken situation. But as Christians, we know better. We know that God didn't forsake us, but rather God is there in the midst. God is being crucified through each and every single person that is dying unnaturally at this point. So the thing is, the only message that I could send to all this madness right now is that after Good Friday comes Easter Sunday. We know that after death comes life. God never forgets us. God doesn't forsake us. God is always with us through the pain, through the struggle. But we have to be the ones to take action as well. And that action I think we should take is non-violent resistance in order to stand against the situation that we are facing. We can transform society through the truth of the gospel that good will overcome evil, that Christ is with us, that God made God's self incarnate to be with all of us, that we are all made good and none of us are worthless. Because even though many of us might deem others worthless and exclude and ignore people, God doesn't. God really doesn't. So, to those who feel excluded and ignored, please know that God will make things right for you. And for all these people who are listening, watching, for anyone who hears this, I do hope that we can climb onto that donkey with Christ and to make our triumphant entry into our cities as well, into our death dealing systems and these situations of oppression. Because I hope and I pray that we can unite and resist violence in a non violent manner. Anyway, that's it for me this week. So, as always, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you all soon. Thank you.